As World War II raged on, and America had not yet gotten involved, it's believed that President Franklin D. Roosevelt was eager to send troops into the fray. However, by November of 1941, the Japanese had still not attacked the United States, so the president had to convince Congress to declare war against the Axis when they had done nothing directly against them. It was during these days that Admiral Thomas Hart, commander of the U.S. fleet in Asia, received a puzzling secret presidential directive. The letter contained orders to prepare 3 old Navy vessels and send them to an area infested with over 50 Japanese warships, the intention being to provoke an incident that would justify declaring war against the Empire of Japan. Stark immediately realized it could be a one-way mission for the Navy crews, but he had no choice but to obey. The world at war. World War II began on September 3, 1939, when Great Britain and France declared war on Germany after the Wehrmacht invaded Poland. Although the Soviets invaded the eastern section of Poland 2 weeks later through a secret pact with the Third Reich, neither the British nor the French declared war on the Soviet Union and did little to support the Polish. From that moment on, the US closely followed the conflict in Europe and the Pacific, where Japan's expansionism threatened the Philippines and other American interests in Asia. President Roosevelt and the military command doubted the Japanese would dare attack the US. They firmly believed that if Japan eradicated Britain's empire in Asia and the Far East, chances of democracy would be lost forever, and the American political and economic influence would diminish. During the secret Argentia Conference in August of 1941, Prime Minister Winston Churchill and President Roosevelt reinforced their union against their common enemies. Churchill urged Roosevelt to send more war supplies and take a more public and aggressive stance against Japan and Germany, but Roosevelt still opted for neutrality. However, he promised that if Britain was attacked in the Pacific, America would answer the call for help. As the months passed by, Roosevelt held some war councils about the ongoing Japanese threat. French Indochina was now under Japanese control, and Burma was next, while India was also at peril. But to go to war and support the British, President Roosevelt had to convince the American population and the US Congress. The problem was that less than 20% of the population wanted to go to war. The vast majority of Americans had adopted an isolationist posture, as they believed the war had nothing to do with them. During an early November 1941 War Council meeting, Secretary of War Henry Stimson suggested how the US could trick Japan into firing the first shot. One suggestion was to send a personal message to Emperor Hirohito regarding the Panay incident of December 1937, in which a Navy gunboat was sunk by the Japanese on the Yangtze River in China. As the outcome would probably result in several casualties, the US could use it as an excuse to declare war against Japan. However, the idea was ditched, as the problem lay in how the US would go to war if only Vietnam, Thailand, Singapore, and the East Indies were attacked, and not the Philippines. It was only after a meeting 1 month later that Roosevelt and the War Council figured out a deceitful justification to unite the American people on a clear path to war. Provoking an incident. On December 1, 1941, Admiral Thomas C. Hart, commander of the U.S. Asiatic Fleet in the Philippines, received a secret presidential directive via radiogram. The ambiguous syntax puzzled Hart and left him with more questions than answers. It read, quote, "President directs that the following be done as soon as possible, and within 2 days if possible after receipt of this dispatch. Charter 3 small vessels to form a defensive information patrol. Minimum requirements to establish identity as U.S. men of war commanded by naval officer. Mounting a small gun and 1 machine gun would suffice. Filipino crews may be employed with minimum naval ratings to accomplish purpose, which is to observe and report by radio Japanese movements in the West China Sea and Gulf of Siam. Use of Isabel authorized by the President as one of 3 vessels, but not other naval vessels." Further instructions indicated that the 3 vessels had to be stationed at Hue, Camaran Bay, and Point de Camau. Hart was bewildered. The instruction was top secret priority 1, and it made no sense. To begin with, the US Navy already had the latest intelligence on the Japanese movements. Second, compromising 3 ships was pointless, as reconnaissance aircraft from PBY Catalinas were safer and more effective. And third, the order specified the use of Isabel, an old World War I-era yacht converted to convoy escort instead of official US Navy vessels. Hart knew there was something more behind the mission. He also believed it was a one-way operation, and that the only reason to use Filipino crews was to rally that country against the Japanese. Still, Hart carried out the orders and kept his skepticism to himself. He then called Isabel's captain for a briefing the following day and went to bed thinking about the reckless mission. A mission is launched. The man in charge of USS Isabel for the past years was Lieutenant John Walker Payne Jr., and the ship really showed its age and was in very poor condition. The converted yacht was a shadow of its former past. After joining the Yangtze Patrol in the 1920s, it was sent to the Philippines, where it was upgraded with 7.62mm guns. However, nothing could be done to boost its speed and armor. Hart briefed Payne on the top-secret mission and told him that no one besides the two of them could know about its true purpose, which he believed to be an excuse by the president to provoke the Japanese and join the war. Payne was to travel to Cam Bay, where he would report on the movements of all Japanese ships in the area. To cover up for this task, Hart would say that he was on a mission to search for the remains of a fallen PBY Catalina aircraft. Hart also instructed that if the Japanese attacked, Payne needed to fight until the last bullet and destroy Isabel before it fell into the enemy's hands. After taking in 5 Insular Force Filipinos, Payne ordered the removal of all topside weights, including motorboats, and proceeded to tell his executive officer, Hugo Boas, about Admiral Hart's orders. Isabel and its crew then left Manila on December 3, 1941. Later in the day, a PBY Catalina warned Admiral Hart that over 50 Japanese cruisers, destroyers, and other warships had been sighted at Cam Bay, where Payne was headed. Hart was sure that he was not going to see Payne and USS Isabel ever again. 2 days later, the Japanese aircraft spotted Payne and the crew, and the captain was ready to go down like a true American hero. Isabel's doom. While Isabel and her crew departed on the assigned mission, another vessel was chartered, following the president's orders. It was the Lanikai, a World War I-era schooner-rigged diesel-powered yacht that had been built in 1914 in California. The chosen man to command the ship and its Filipino crew was Lieutenant Kemp Tolley, a veteran of the Yangtze Patrol who had just returned from his last mission and was immediately assigned to the Lanikai. Tolley was told by Hart's second-in-command that the ship had just been commissioned by the Navy. He had to equip Lanikai with a cannon and machine gun before departure in 24 hours. The captain argued that this request was impossible. However, he complied once Commander Slocum told him that, quote, "The president himself has personally ordered it." Tolley had to manage with whatever resources he could find, and a Spanish-American war cannon that dated back to 1898 and 2 30-caliber Lewis from 1918 were rapidly installed in the Lanikai. The 6 Filipino crewmen recruited for the mission were not given thorough explanations as they did not speak English, but they were handed Tommy guns and hand grenades. Knowing that this was likely a one-way mission, Lieutenant Tolley left all his belongings behind and departed for Indochina on December 7th, even as the ship's radio did not work and there was not enough water for the entire crew. A day later, while taking supper near Corregidor, the malfunctioning radio emitted a message that said, quote, "Orange war plan in effect. Return to Cavite." The Japanese had just attacked Pearl Harbor, and the United States was now officially at war with the Empire of Japan. The plan was no longer necessary. Tolley then ordered the crew to set course for Corregidor, as battle awaited there. Hours later, an old vessel entered Manila Bay. It was Isabel. When Admiral Hart met Payne, he said, quote, "I did not expect to see you again." Although the Japanese had spotted Isabel on December 5th, they refrained from taking it down so as not to alert the U.S. Navy of the upcoming attack on Pearl Harbor. Years later, after Tolley had become Rear Admiral, he asked Admiral Hart if he was really set up as bait to provoke a casus belli against Japan during the 1941 mission. The Admiral nodded and replied, quote, "Yes, I think you were bait, and we could prove it, but I won't. And you neither." Thank you for watching our video. Please like and subscribe to our Dark Documentaries channels to find more exciting historical content. And let us know in the comments below what you think of this unique mission issued by President Roosevelt.